I'm not going to start with a flashy intro or a list of specs that sound impressive on paper. Instead, I want to help you decide whether this particular NAS motherboard actually fits the workflow you have in mind. If you're on the fence about spending a chunk of your budget on a mini ITX board that promises a lot of connectivity, you're probably wondering if the extra features translate into real-world convenience or just more complexity. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Think of this as a practical rundown of what you'll see when you actually plug this thing into a case, hook it up to your network, and start moving data around. First off, the category we're dealing with here is a high-end home or small business NAS platform. Most people buying a dedicated NAS board are trying to avoid the just a PC route because they want something that runs quietly, consumes less power, and can be tucked away in a 1,717 cm footprint. The SIENSNET Ultra series tries to hit that sweet spot by bundling a built-in Ultra 9 CPU, 64 GB of DDR5 memory, and a pair of 10 gigabits Ethernet ports. What that means in day-to-day use is you can run multiple services, media streaming, backup jobs, a few Docker containers without having to constantly monitor CPU load. For a family that streams 4K movies to a couple of devices while also backing up laptops over the weekend, the dual 10 GB can shave minutes off what would otherwise be a half-hour transfer on a standard gigabit link. Now, let's talk about the storage side. The board ships with 3 SFF8087 connectors, which translates to 12 SATA 6 gigabits per second bays when you use the appropriate breakout cables. In practice, that's a lot of drives for a mini ITX size, but you do need the right kind of backplane or a compatible case that can accommodate those cables. I've seen a few builders on forums mention that routing the 3/4-lane SAS cables through a cramped case can become a fiddly exercise, especially if you're trying to keep airflow tidy. If you plan to run a dense array of 2.5-inch SSDs for speed, you'll probably need a custom solution or a case designed for SFF8087 breakout, which adds a hidden cost you might not have budgeted for initially. One of the biggest practical strengths is the inclusion of 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports. Thunderbolt 4 isn't common on NAS boards, and it opens up a few niche but useful scenarios. For example, if you have a Mac Studio or a high-end laptop that supports Thunderbolt, you can attach the NAS directly as an external drive and get up to 40 gigabits per second throughput without needing a separate network switch. That can be a lifesaver when you need to move a large video archive quickly for editing. The catch, though, is that you'll need Thunderbolt-compatible cables and devices, which adds to the overall cost, and many typical NAS users never actually use that capability. On the connectivity front, the 2 10 gigabits Ethernet ports can be teamed for link aggregation, giving you redundancy and a little extra bandwidth when multiple users are pulling data simultaneously. In a small office setting where a handful of workstations are constantly accessing a shared project folder, that can reduce bottlenecks noticeably. The board also offers 4 USB 3.2 ports and a PCIe 4.0 x 8 slot for an optional graphics card or additional NVMe expansion. I've seen people use the PCIe slot to add a dedicated hardware transcoder for Plex, which offloads the CPU and keeps streaming smooth. The downside here is that a mini ITX chassis rarely has the space for a full-height GPU, so you're limited to low-profile cards, and the power delivery on the board is modest, meaning you can't just drop in a high-end GPU without risking instability. Power consumption is another real-world factor. The Ultra 9 CPUs range from the 225H up to the 285H, and while they are efficient for a server-grade chip, the board's 64 GB of DDR5 memory is a fixed cost you can't scale down. If your workload is light, say, a simple file server with occasional backups, you might be paying for more memory than you'll ever use. On the flip side, if you're planning to run multiple virtual machines or a heavy media transcoding workload, that RAM will be a solid foundation and you won't need to upgrade later. Who should buy this board? If you already have a case that supports SFF8087 breakout, or you're comfortable customizing a small form factor chassis, and you need the flexibility of dual 10 GB plus Thunderbolt 4, this is a compelling package. It also makes sense for hobbyists who like to tinker with Docker containers, run a small home lab, or need a fast, low-latency storage node for video editing. The built-in radiator helps keep the CPU temperatures in check without a massive fan, which is a nice touch for a quiet home environment. Who should skip it? If you're looking for a plug-and-play NAS that you can drop into a typical Synology-style enclosure and walk away, you'll probably find the extra wiring and case constraints too much hassle. Users who only need a few drives for basic backup.